1. Germany started. World War I. Germany has long been painted as the sole architect of the Great War. This wasn't just a popular opinion. It was actually written into the Treaty of Versailles as the war guilt clause. But if you look at the archives, the truth is way more chaotic. Europe in 1914 was a messy web of secret alliances and old grudges. When Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, it triggered a domino effect that no single country truly controlled. While Germany's invasion of Belgium definitely accelerated things, Russian mobilization and British naval interests were just as much a part of the fuse. History was written by the victors to justify massive reparations, but in reality, UWI was a collective failure of an entire continent, not the work of just one nation. 2. Vikings wore horned helmets. When you picture a Viking, you see a massive warrior with horns sprouting from his helmet. It's an iconic look, but it's 100% fiction. There is zero archaeological evidence that Vikings ever wore horns in battle. In a real fight, horns would be a total liability. They're easy to grab and make it way harder to deflect a sword blow. So where did the lie come from? We can thank 19th century opera. Costume designers for Richard Wagner's Ring Cycle created the horned look to make the characters look more barbaric and imposing. The image stuck, and Hollywood did the rest. The real Vikings wore simple practical iron or leather caps designed for one thing: survival. 3. Napoleon was short. The Napoleon complex is a psychological term named after the famous French emperor's supposedly tiny stature. But Napoleon Bonaparte wasn't short at all. At the time of his death, he was measured at 5 feet 2 inches, but that was in French units. When you convert that to modern imperial units, he was actually 5'7". For the early 1800s, that was actually slightly above average height. The myth of the little corporal was started by British propaganda. Cartoonists drew him as a tiny, angry child to mock his ambitions. Napoleon also surrounded himself with the Imperial Guard, who were required to be very tall, making him look smaller by comparison. He was a giant of history, standing at a perfectly normal height. 4. The Trojan Horse. The story of the massive wooden horse used by the Greeks to sneak into Troy is one of the most famous tales in history, but most historians and archaeologists believe it never actually happened, at least not like that. Homer's Odyssey is a work of epic poetry, not a news report. Archaeological digs at the site of Troy show evidence of fire and war, but no giant wooden horse. Many scholars believe the horse was actually a metaphor for a battering ram or a siege engine decorated with horsehide, or even an earthquake that broke the city walls, since Poseidon, the god of earthquakes, was also the god of horses. It's a great story, but the Greeks likely took the city through brute force, not a wooden gift. 5. Einstein failed math. It's the ultimate comfort for struggling students. Even Albert Einstein failed math. Unfortunately, it's not true. Einstein was a mathematical prodigy. By the age of 12, he was teaching himself advanced algebra and Euclidean geometry. By 15, he had mastered calculus. The rumor started because of a change in the grading system at his school in Switzerland. One year, the scale was flipped, and his high grades suddenly looked like failing marks to researchers looking back at the records years later. When shown a newspaper article claiming he had failed, Einstein laughed and said, "I had mastered integral and differential calculus before I was 15. 6. Cleopatra was a seductive beauty. The image of Cleopatra as an exotic femme fatale who enchanted powerful men with her looks alone is world famous. But the historical truth is, Cleopatra was likely pretty average looking. Ancient coins from her time show her with a prominent hooked nose and a strong chin. The historian Plutarch wrote that her beauty wasn't unrivaled or striking at first glance. What actually hooked men like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony was her intellect. She spoke 9 languages and was a brilliant strategist. The seductive temptress trope was actually a smear campaign by Roman propaganda. Her enemy, Octavian, didn't want to admit he was being outsmarted by a genius female ruler, so it was easier to paint her as a foreign witch who used sex to manipulate men. 7. Columbus discovered America. Christopher Columbus is credited with discovering the New World in 1492, but you you can't discover a place where tens of millions of people are already living in complex civilizations. Even if we're talking about Europeans, Columbus wasn't first. Leif Erikson and his Viking crew established a settlement in Canada nearly 500 years before Columbus was even born. Furthermore, Columbus never even set foot on the mainland of North America. He spent his time in the Caribbean and Central America. He died believing he had found a shortcut to Asia, completely unaware that he had stumbled upon a continent that had been inhabited for over 15,000 years. 8. Rats spread the Black Death. The rat has been the face of the plague for centuries. We've been told that flea-infested rats on trade ships brought the Black Death to Europe, killing half the population. But recent computer modeling suggests the rats are innocent. The plague moved way too fast to be spread by rats moving from house to house. Instead, the data points to human parasites, fleas, and body lice that lived on people and in their clothing. These parasites moved with us on carts, in markets, and in crowded cities. The rats were victims of the plague just like humans, but the real super spreaders were the people themselves.